Bonjour! Thanks for tuning in! In our previous video, we learned 50 basic French words and phrases and some useful vocabulary for travel. Now you're ready to learn the basics of French verbs. Verbs allow you to memorise sentences, which means they are an essential step in moving forward from memorising phrases to having real-life, fluid conversations. Luckily, most French verbs follow conjugation patterns based on the last two letters of the infinitive or unconjugated form. There are three distinct verb endings in French: er, ir, and re. First, let's have a look at how to conjugate er verbs. So, verbs in le premier groupe, or the first group, end in er. Around 90% of the verbs in the French language end in er. Let's have a look at some examples. To use these verbs in a sentence, you'll need to conjugate it to match it to the subject and the time at which the event is taking place. French is known to have many tenses, 21 to be exact, but there's no need to be intimidated. In this video, I'll help you master the 4 main tenses that you'll need to feel comfortable in any French conversation. We'll be looking at le présent, or the present tense, for routine and current actions. L'imparfait, or the imperfect tense, to describe incomplete or ongoing actions or states of being. Le passé composé, or the past tense, to describe actions that occurred in the past. And finally, le futur, or the future tense, to talk about future plans or intentions, or to make predictions about the future. Let's use the example of the verb parler, or to speak. We'll see how the endings change depending on the tense. The endings that we add to each verb are dependent on who is speaking. To add the correct ending, first of all we have to have the stem of the infinitive verb. The stem is the base of the verb with no ending attached. We can then add the different endings to the stem of the verb to form the conjugated verb. Here you'll see the endings to the verb parler in the present tense are added in bold to the stem. Once we have added each ending, here's what we get for the present tense. Je parle. Tu parles. Il ou elle parle. Nous parlons. Vous parlez. Il parle. Attention, we don't pronounce the ENT at the end of il parle. This is the case for many ER verbs in the third person plural. If you want to use the same verb in the imperfect tense, in other words to say I was speaking, you can add the following endings to the stem. Je parlais. Tu parlais. Il or elle parlait. Nous parlions. Vous parliez. Il or elle parlait. Here are 2 more tenses and their endings if you want to go even further. Next, let's look at verbs that end in ir, which form the deuxième groupe, or the second group. There are around 300 verbs in the French language that end in ir. Here are some of the most common ones. But be careful, verbs with asterisks have irregular conjugations. That means they don't follow the regular IR conjugation tables. Let's take a regular IR verb, finir, or to finish, and see how the endings change. First, let's look again at the present tense. Remember, the endings change depending on the person and are added to the stem of the verb. Je finis. Tu finis. Il ou elle finit. Nous finissons. Vous finissez. Il ou elle finissent. Remember, we don't pronounce the final ENT in il or elle finissent. Now let's look at the imperfect tense endings to express what you were doing in the past. Je finissais. Tu finissais. Il ou elle finissait. Nous finissions. Vous finissiez. Il ou elle finissait. Here are 2 more tenses with finir. Now we'll look at verbs in le troisième groupe, or the third group, that end in re. Here are some of the most common. Again, verbs with asterisks have irregular conjugations and do not follow the regular RE verb conjugation tables. But let's use the example of vendre, to sell, to look at how the endings change depending on the tense. Again, starting with the present tense. Je vends. Tu vends. Il ou elle vend. Nous vendons. Vous vendez. Il ou elle vendent. Je vendais. Tu vendais. Il ou elle vendait. Nous vendions. Vous vendiez. Il ou elle vendait. Again, here are two more tenses and their conjugations to help you. Finally, let's have a look at how we conjugate those pesky irregular verbs. In French, there are lots of irregular verbs which fall outside the pattern of normal conjugations. Irregular verbs follow a similar structure where the ending is dropped and changed to agree with the subject. But the specific endings have small nuances depending on the verb. Let's look at a popular irregular verb and arguably the most common French irregular verb. And that is être, to be. Let's look at what we've got in the present tense. Je suis. Tu es. Il ou elle est. Nous sommes. Vous êtes. Il ou elles sont. And the imperfect tense. J'étais. Tu étais. Il ou elle était. Nous étions. Vous étiez. Ils ou elles étaient. Again, here are some examples of the conjugation in two further tenses. So, how did you get on? Think you've mastered the basics of French verbs? Take your French language learning to the next level with Rosetta Stone. Go to www.rosettastone.com or download the app from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and start your French language learning journey today. And for more educational videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. À plus!